and gentlemen, welcome to the second Life on Tap for 2015 fall semester. Really excited to have a great panel of speakers tonight talking about education and life in the education field. Our first speaker is a good friend of mine, Miss Emma Boyle, who is an '09 history grad and is currently the chair of the history department at John Paul the Great University over in Dumfries. High school in Dumfries, Virginia. And welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks for the invitation. It's always good to be back on Crisendom's campus. I turned my back for 1 second in the group huddle, and I turned around again, and they said, "Oh, seniority's going first." So I'm doing well, not taking that too personally, being the oldest on the panel. As Greg said, I graduated in 2009 with a major in history and a minor in English. When I was here, I was part of the Debate Society. I was an editor for The Rambler. I was an RA, and I really feel like those experiences were formational in the teacher that I am becoming. I've been at John Paul the Great for 5 years. This is my 6th year at John Paul the Great Catholic High School. It's administered by the Nashville Dominicans. It's about an hour southeast of here. And I count myself very blessed that God has taken me from Crisendom to John Paul the Great. I'm also 3 for 3 on Crisendom chaplains. So I've worked for all three priests I've worked for in this diocese have been graduates of Crisendom, and I count that as a great blessing as well. So one of the, I'd like to do 3 things tonight. Okay, I'm a teacher, so here we go, 1, 2, 3. So I'd like to do 3 things. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and how I became a teacher and why I became a teacher. I'd like to offer you just 1 or 2 thoughts on what I think are some of the biggest challenges in education today and why it's so important to have good Catholics in the field of education. And then I'd like to offer you any practical tips that I can that might help you in the process of becoming teachers yourselves, or help you if you decide to enter the field of education in any way. So my time at Crisendom, like Greg said, I graduated in 2009. I feel like my time at Crisendom was really formative, as I know that every alumnus or every alumna who comes back will say this to you, that these are 4 years that you'll never get back, and these are 4 years that, I would kill to have these 4 years again, and all those cliches are true, because this is a special place, as you know. But I feel like it gave me good habits of study and learning and inquiry that have really served me in good stead as a teacher. If I don't have an answer for my students, which is often, because they're always throwing these neat little curveballs at me, then I know where to go to find the answers to my questions. I know how to search, and I feel like Crisendom was really important for that. I also feel like Crisendom was really important in teaching me how to integrate different disciplines. Sometimes my students are shocked that what they're learning in an English class and what they're learning in a bioethics class and what they're learning in my history class is all the same conversation. And to me, that's no surprise at all, because I spent 4 years on this campus where everything was integrated and everything was whole and everything was part of the same truth. I also gained really amazing friends during my time here. I count that as one of my greatest blessings of my Crisendom experience. Some of the dearest friends I have today are the ones who were with me on Top Floor Campion many years ago. So Crisendom, like I said, has been really, really important to me, important to my family, and I wouldn't be the same person without it. I might not be a teacher without it. And being a teacher sort of has served as a natural springboard for me to think about what education is objectively, but then what education often is in our culture today. Because it was in my fall semester of my senior year, I was in the Inklings with Dr. Schwartz, and I read The Abolition of Man for the first time by C.S. Lewis. Put it on your reading list, homework for life. Take the Inklings, but read The Abolition of Man. That it contains this beautiful metaphor for teachers that I think is true for anyone who wishes to engage and evangelize to the culture. And in this work, one of the things that Lewis says is that modern educators do not cut down jungles, but we irrigate deserts. We do not cut down jungles, but we irrigate deserts. And I find that myself coming back to that image again and again, because this is what we strive to do as teachers, and this is who we strive to be. The principal at my school, where I teach now, is a Dominican sister of St. Cecilia. And she loves to tell me, she loves to tell all of us, but she loves to tell me that textbooks don't teach students, the internet does not teach students, but teachers teach students. And no matter where technology goes in the classroom, and no matter where technology integration takes the field of education, I believe that that will always be true. I believe that it will always be the witnesses, the personal encounters, the personal relationships that will win souls for Christ. So going back to C.S. Lewis, I love, he critiques modern education in The Abolition of Man, and he talks about this, this new textbook that has a new cover. It's a green textbook, and so everyone wants this new textbook because it's green. And he critiques it for teaching students things based on feelings and value judgments, rather than based on what is actually true. And I would argue that that is the direction that education is headed at large in our society today. That you learn what you want to learn, or you learn what you feel like you want to learn, rather than learning what is good for you. If a parent parented in that way, no child would eat anything but gummy worms, right? So it's a great responsibility of a good educator to be part of that partnership with the parents and to help students learn what is good for them. What we read at Christendom, what you are reading, and what I read at Christendom is part of that. It's part of that healthy diet, that makes us well-rounded and is good for our souls. But the culture doesn't see it that way, and the culture does not see education in that way. Education in the culture at large is kind of chaotic, right? It's cacophonous. I think George Weigel said that when he was here a couple weeks ago. He said that cacophony has found its way into modern education. I think that's so true. Catholic education is not exempt. We need good witnesses. We need good, faithful Catholics in Catholic education, because the culture comes to us. No Catholic school is exempt from the worst ills of the culture. When I was here, Father Heisler was the chaplain for 3 of my 4 years, and I remember he used to say that the church is not a hotel for saints, it's a hospital for sinners. And that's a similar image that Pope Francis mentioned a few years back when he said that the church is like a field hospital after battle. And those are our Catholic schools, right? So you don't have to go to a public school, you don't have to go to a mission school to find people in need. Our Catholic schools are mission territory. So being a teacher has given me great opportunities to learn and great opportunities to evangelize the culture. And it's a place where I'm still learning, and where I hope to continue to learn. I have a couple final kind of pieces of advice. Some things that I did that I was advised to do that worked out really well, and then a few things that I wish I had done that would have perhaps saved me a couple of steps along the way. I advise you to observe teachers not as a student in their class, but as an aspiring teacher. Lots of people think they know how to teach because they have had teachers, or they think they know what teachers do because they have been students in the classroom, and those are two vastly different experiences, as any teacher will tell you with a little wry smile. Also, think about the kind of school that you want to be a part of. I think it's really important to find a school where you truly believe in the mission. I think it's important to be at a school that has a clear-cut mission, because that's going to fuel you on the tough days when you have, an upset parent on the phone, and maybe you had a snow day that threw your whole calendar off, and maybe you had, a kid got a bad grade on a test, and you're trying not to take that personally. When these little things start to get you down, having a mission to come back to is really crucial. And when I was here, I had the opportunity to think hard about what education is when I took the teaching practicum, and what history is as part of my major when I took historiography. And I feel like I've been able to give back a little bit of that at my current school, because my school is still very new. It was only founded in 2008. And so one of the projects that we had as a faculty in 2012 was to craft department mission statements that reflected our school mission statement. And I felt like because I had reflected at length on what history is and the purpose of education, because I'd read Augustine and Christopher Dawson and G.K. Chesterton, because I had really just, let those ideas rest in me, I feel like I had something to contribute to my department and to my school. I would also encourage you, when you're looking at the field of education and when you're looking at a school, is to consider other support roles that are necessary for a healthy school. So think about campus ministry, counseling, coaching, administrative roles, student life. All of these people have to be in place in order for a school to function and flourish, in order for students to flourish. I would advise you, if you're approaching a school for employment, to be ready to offer yourself in many roles, especially at Catholic schools or private schools. They're looking for teachers who are willing to do lots of things. When I first went to my school, I offered to teach history or English or religion, and I coached for 5 years, and now I help with the drama program. And so it's good and it's helpful when you're able to assist in a number of areas. But I feel like that's been another benefit of my Christendom degree. Just by virtue of having a Christendom diploma, I automatically had advanced catechist certification in the Arlington Diocese. I just had to send in my transcript and I had this advanced certification, which is something that all diocesan teachers will have to have starting next school year. But you will have it just from your 6 semesters, minimum 6 semesters of your Christendom degree. But I also feel like my Christendom education prepared me to integrate disciplines. So sometimes my history students are a little horrified when they have to read poetry in my history class, or when we talk about the real purpose of a semicolon, or when we talk about the lives of the saints in English class. But again, that's the beauty. That is just the beauty of a Catholic education. And I feel like that's what Christendom prepared me for. Think long and hard about the way your resume looks. You're going to be, if you're a senior, maybe if you're a junior, you're going to be working on writing a resume. I was fortunate when I was here to have a mentor who sat down with me over the course of my last semester and really helped me craft a resume that reflected my best skills. Because sometimes teaching is, it's like one part, magic tricks, one part referee, one part 3-ring circus. It's a little bit of everything. So I feel like I was able to bring my natural love of learning with some of my experiences from the college, like some of my other extracurriculars from the college, and present myself as a potential teacher. I also did the teaching practicum here, which was very valuable. It gave me the 6 credits of education, which is the minimum requirement for diocesan certification. State certification is a lot more involved. It's almost equivalent to a master's degree in the state of Virginia, some of the highest standards. If you're going home after graduation to teach in your hometown or your home diocese, then you'd want to check those specifications for sure. But I also feel like the practicum was valuable for me because it gave me my first real classroom experience where I actually had to stand in front of a class and teach, and wasn't playing pretend. I was really teaching for the first time, and that was a kind of a good wake-up call. Also, know your network. This is one thing that I really wish I had done. I wish I had known and taken advantage of the network that was already in place, especially in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area, but really around the country. People who know Christendom, either personally or by reputation. I spent a lot of time making cold calls to all kinds of Catholic schools in the area and going on interviews for principals who had never heard of me and only vaguely knew what Christendom was. When I got my first teaching job, it was a phone call to the priest who was a Christendom grad, and it was one phone call, and I didn't even have a job interview. I just went to that school and started teaching. And I just really wish that I had, kind of saved myself a few of those intermediate steps. I was going to say something else along with resumes and interviews. Oh, something to know about schools is that they often don't advertise hiring until very late in the year. So it might be late April, early May, maybe even into the summer before some of these decisions are made. So you kind of have to emotionally prepare yourself for that if you're seriously pursuing a job as a teacher. My last piece of advice, and this is something that only came to me after I had already been a teacher for several years, is to assess yourself and your strengths and your gifts. So things like a temperaments test or Myers-Briggs is really good for assessing your strengths and weaknesses, but I really highly recommend a program out of the Siena Institute, which is a Dominican lay organization. It's written by Sherry Weddle, who wrote Forming Intentional Disciples. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book. But the program is called Called and Gifted, and you can take a workshop. It's usually a day or a day and a half, but it assesses the spiritual charisms that God has given you for the sake of the church and the world. And I think it's really important to understand the soul role that you fulfill, this place that no one else can hold in the church and in the church's project of evangelization. So I offer that to you as something to think about before you graduate, and then also to continue to develop afterwards. So thank you all very much for being here tonight. Thanks for listening to me. I look forward to meeting you at the end, and I wish you just the very best of luck, both your time here and in your future careers. I hope to see many of you as teachers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Our next guest speaker is Miss Kelly Lawyer. She.
No. Sorry, you introduced me.
Oh. Well, the next speaker is Christine Nucio, who is a 2012. There you go. You beat her by 1 year. 2012, also a history major, and she's currently teaching at Oakcrest, an all-girls school in. It's in Maryland, I believe.
No.
McLean, okay, so Northern Virginia, and we have a couple of students here at Christendom who also went to Oakcrest, so glad you guys are here. But without further ado, Christine.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So as he mentioned, my name is Christine Nucio. This is the beginning of my 4th year at Oakcrest. I started working at Oakcrest right out of Christendom. And when I came to Christendom, I had no idea I was going to be a teacher. And I'm very glad that I am now. I can't think of anything I would rather do. So I hope from tonight, if you walk away with nothing else, you walk away realizing that I am profoundly happy in what I'm doing right now, and couldn't imagine working or doing anything other than teaching high school history. At Oakcrest, I teach 10th and 11th grade history, and as Emma mentioned, if you're a teacher in a small school, you wear many hats. So I'm also a soccer coach, I'm an assistant track coach, I teach debate, I've subbed in for everything under the sun from philosophy to a multitude of different history classes. So you do really come to appreciate your Christendom education when you're teaching, because you realize how being well-rounded in a multitude of disciplines allows you to not only see the holistic nature of education, but also allows you to be the person that they can come to when the philosophy teacher's gone for a semester and they say, oh gosh, we need someone, no one else is qualified to teach philosophy. Wait, Christine, she went to Christendom, she must know philosophy. So there I was teaching philosophy. Don't tell the philosophy majors that they let a history major do that. So when I left Christendom, I did want to teach. I didn't know that when I first came here, but when I left, I wanted to teach. I did not have a teaching job lined up. I had meant to get into one program up in Providence, and that hadn't worked out. I had a partial scholarship to go to CUA for grad school and education, but I was looking for teaching jobs, so I was really looking for. And it was one of those things where I was giving guitar lessons over the summer while I was waiting to see what I was going to find, and the mother of my student said, well, there's this girls' school in in Northern Virginia, and she wrote a name down on a piece of paper. I'd never heard of the school before, and I went and Googled them after the guitar lesson, and they needed a history teacher. And they needed a history teacher with 3 to 5 years of experience. And I was like, oh. And I said, well, what the heck, I'll apply anyways. So I applied anyways, and now I'm there. So first lesson to be learned tonight is, if they say they need experience, apply anyways. Especially because schools are looking sometimes late in the year, a teacher's not coming back, apply anyways. They may just need you. There may not be a candidate with 3 years of experience there. Of course, experience is always preferred, but it's not always necessary. So that's the first point. Second point, I'm really glad that Emma brought up mission, because one of the things I did learn when I was applying to multiple schools was to go onto the website and look at the mission statement. Because with your application to a school to teach there, you should be sending in a polished resume, but you should also be sending in a cover letter saying why you want to teach at that school. And if you can speak to the mission of the school and you can tell them why you're a good fit for their school, if I can look at Oakcrest School and say, well, this is a school where they're trying to train the next generation of female leaders. Oakcrest is an all-girls school. The next generation of female leaders in character, in Catholic tradition, and I can look at it and say, wow, I come from a family of all girls. Female leadership is incredibly important to me. Education is incredibly important to me, and I can explain that to them. I've suddenly become a much more interesting candidate, right? So you want to know about the school's mission because you want to make sure you fit well there. You want to make sure you like the school, but it can help you explain to them why they should take a look at you. So that's one very practical tip. So why did I go into teaching? Well, I went into teaching because of this college, because of the professors here. And I think you can all agree with me, even if you haven't been here for very long, that our professors are the best, absolutely the best, and that they really care for us, and they care for our education. And you know that they work long hours, and everything they do is to make sure that we learn the truth and that we are equipped when we go out to the world to share that truth with other people. And that is really why they are here. And it was that experience of having those kinds of professors that was absolutely transformative to me. Dr. McGuire was a great mentor when I was here. Professor Janosowski also in particular. Dr. Schwartz was very important for my intellectual formation as a historian. I still use his notes as the backbone of all of my history classes. I think every history teacher does. But meeting those teachers and seeing the impact they had on me was what gave me the idea, I would like to do that for someone else. I'd also tutored over the summers and realized that teaching was actually something I really enjoyed doing. So that was when I started exploring teaching. And like Emma mentioned, I tried the teaching practicum as a first example of that, absolutely loved it. And I can't recommend it enough. The teaching practicum was what taught me how to look at a teacher, not as a student, but as a prospective teacher. And like she said, it also gives you all kinds of practical benefits. It gives you education credits you can put down on a resume. It gives you experience in the classroom. It gives you contacts. You're able to put down perhaps a teacher that you observed. You could put them down as a reference perhaps if you taught in their classroom at any point in the year, and then you have a reference from another teacher. Those are great things to have. So those are definitely reasons. Also, as a special note for anyone who's homeschooled, one of the tough questions I got in my interview at Oakcrest was they said, well, you were homeschooled all the way up to college, so how are you going to be in a classroom? You never were in a classroom. Which seems like a fairly decent question, right? And I said, well, I have done the teaching practicum. I've been in the classroom before. Obviously, my college had a classroom, but that didn't count. And I was able to point to other things, teaching CCD, etc., tutoring, things like that. So the teaching practicum, absolutely. The first thing that I could say, you could do that here at Christendom, and that would be a great practical help to you. Secondly, though, I have to give a personal shout out to the Chester Belloc Debate Society, because I was deeply involved in the Chester Belloc Debate Society here, and that was absolutely as well transformative to me. You might not guess it, but when I was a freshman at Christendom, I was tremendously shy. I thought that if I stood up and had to give a presentation to class, I'd probably die of embarrassment. hated talking in front of people. And then I started going to the Chester Ballot debates, and I got really passionately involved in some of the topics, and I had to stand up and give a speech because truth was on the line and I cared about it. And the next thing you know, I was a member, and then I was secretary, and then I was, at the debates all the time. And that taught me communication skills. It helped develop my professionalism, and it has been tremendously helpful for me as a teacher because you have to be able to engage an audience. So if you're not planning on joining the Debate Society, at least go and check out a debate because it's a great opportunity to practice speaking in front of people. And then outside of Christendom education, the other things you can do is use your summers well, I would say. Tutoring is a great way to get a taste of teaching. It's a different vibe than teaching, but it gives you the experience of working with students with problems, experience that you will really, really thank when you're in a classroom with students who might be struggling in different areas. Another thing, one of the mothers in the homeschool group that my family belonged to asked me to help her design a Western Civ curriculum that she could use, sort of a skeleton of that, so she could use it to make sure she was hitting essential points with her kids when she was taking them through it. And that was immensely helpful to have on my resume. It seemed really on the side. It was one of those things that you do kind of on the side you don't think is going to be very helpful, but that was one of the things that Oakcrest would pull out when they introduced me to people. They say, and Christine Nucio, who has experience with curriculum development because she did this in the summer. So those are the kinds of things that keep track of them on your resume, and don't be afraid to bring them up. There's a lot of things you can do that can make you experienced. And as a final point, what I'd like to bring out, I think, is some of the pros and the cons of teaching. So as I said, I love being a teacher. And I love being a teacher because I love being able to see the impact that I have on my students. Not me per se, but just the experience of the education they're receiving. What made me the person I am today was largely the intellectual formation I received from people who cared about my education. It taught me so much of the character I've developed. It taught me so much of my confidence in myself and in my identity as a Catholic, as an American, as part of Western civilization. All of these things made more sense to me with the holistic liberal arts education I received. That is why I would recommend going into teaching. If you care about character development, if you care about seeing that change in people, that's why you should go into teaching. Don't go into teaching if you are interested, for instance, in a competitive work environment where you can sort of salary build, or where you can kind of climb a corporate ladder to higher positions. Not to say that that kind of ambition, there's anything wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can work in many worthwhile fields that way. But you're not going to find that in teaching. There's not salary building in teaching unless you're willing to take on more and more responsibilities. And there's a limit to what you can do. So there's a limit to how big your salary is going to get. You can get to be the head of your department or the head of your school, and that's about where you're going to peak. So that's not why you go into teaching. You don't go into teaching so you have free time in the evenings. You don't have free time in the evenings. You never leave work at home. That's a joke. You don't leave work at home. But it's absolutely worth it. If you care about educating the kids in the classroom, it's absolutely worth it. And they are what makes it worth it for you. Sometimes they're what makes it stressful for you, but they are also what makes it worth it for you. And I think I'll leave to Kelly, who's more experienced in this, the more research, the more in-depth teaching. I'm speaking purely to the high school level here, which is a little bit different. Kelly has a wider background than me, but that I would leave you with. When you're thinking about teaching, ask yourself that. Take some time to try it out, and see if that's what motivates you, that's what drives you, that's what you should go for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Our last and final speaker of the evening is a 2013 grad, also a history major, and a classics major, and she's currently teaching over at Oak Hill in DC. So, Kelly, you have the stage.
All right. So I've been teaching for a long time today, so if I'm losing my voice, I apologize. So I teach at Oak Hill Christian School in Herndon, Virginia, and as these ladies have already said, as a private school teacher, you teach a plethora of subjects and a lot of grades, different grades. I currently teach 2nd and 3rd grade Latin, Latin 1, Advanced Honors Latin, Junior High English, ESL English. For those of you that don't know, that's teaching English as a second language. Most of the students at my school are from other countries, China, Vietnam, South Korea. And then I teach art history to middle school students and then art history to high school students. So I like to keep busy. What can I say? So definitely, I don't want to repeat anything that these ladies have already said. So one of the things I want to focus on is going to graduate school, teaching on the college level as a graduate student and the experiences that you can gain in grad school and why I think that's a great way to go. These ladies, they went straight into teaching and good for you. That's not the way I went. So the first thing I would say is, okay, so how many people in this room think they might go to grad school? How many people in this room think grad school is just like undergrad, only cooler, or maybe not cooler? Okay, good, that's great. Because grad school is really hard. Really hard. It's nothing like Christendom. When they told me, I went to the University of Kentucky. I graduated with a master's degree in classics and a certification in spoken Latin. And when I first went to grad school, you kind of have these magical ideas, or I did at least, about, sitting around and talking about important things and reading all these books and just, having all this time for learning. That's not the case. At least that wasn't the case for me. Grad school is a lot of work. And when I first went there too, when they said you're only taking 3 classes, I thought, 3 classes? I took 6 at Christendom, like every semester. This should be so easy. There's a reason 3 classes are a full load. So I want to give a couple of things about getting ready for grad school. The first is you have to take the GRE, right? So what Christendom has now that I didn't have is a great program to start to prepare to take the GRE and resources to help you pay for taking the GRE because it's an expensive test. All right, so that's the first thing. You have to do it. Bite the bullet and do it as early as possible. If you're a junior, take it your junior year. Right? If you're a senior, take it during the summer if it's offered. Right? Plan ahead. Testing centers fill up fast. And it takes several months to study for it. It's not a test that you can walk in. Well, it's not a test you should walk in and just take cold turkey. Right? It's a test that costs a lot of money for a test that factors very little into grad school admissions, but one that everyone requires you to have. The second thing you need to make sure you have for grad school, just like if you're applying for a job, is a really good resume. And your grad school resume is going to look a little bit different. It's not just going to be your education. It's not just going to be your volunteer experience. It also needs to include something that has to do with what you want to study. So what I mean by that is you don't want to go into grad school necessarily saying, I just want to study history. Right? That's not good enough. You need to be narrower, right? And you may not know, and you can always change later. But you need to go in with some sort of an idea. For example, my roommate in grad school was, or she currently is still, a PhD student, and her specialty is pro-Catholic newspapers in during the French Revolution in France. Right? She came in wanting to work on comics during the French Revolution. No, and political cartoons. So go in with some sort of idea of what you want to study, and you may not know. One way you can figure this out, take different classes. Take different classes in different disciplines. Have conversations with your professors if there's something that they mention that might pique your interest. You want to go into something that try to go into something that not everyone else has already studied, and everything there is to say about it has pretty much been said. So for example, Dr. Kelly is here, and a lot has been said about Tudor England. So finding an aspect of Tudor England that hasn't really been covered might prove difficult. But maybe he can help you find something that branches off that has to do with Tudor England that might be a new area of interest. All right, so go in, GRE, resume. The other thing I recommend, and I did this, so the University of Kentucky is very interesting. They're the only program in the United States, and other than in Belgium, in the world, that does spoken Latin. And what I mean by that is they take it back to the University of Paris. So we have classes that are totally in Latin. Our papers are in Latin. Our conversations and discussions about books and sections and of things are totally in Latin. And I know you all just got this really weird look on your face. Yes, I am that person, that really nerdy person. But how did I come to find this program? I found this program first on the recommendation of a former professor here, Dr. Mark Clark, who's now at CUA. And I owe a lot to him and to Professor Lipiello, who was also here, who steered me in the right direction as far as what programs to apply to. So ask your professors in whatever specialty, what programs would they recommend for that topic? Just because you want to go into history doesn't mean every program is focusing on the right area of history that would be good for you. So for example, my roommate, she is French Revolution, right? So there are certain programs that are the best that she applied to. The University of Wisconsin, University of Kentucky. I had friends who studied the areas in the Civil War history. They applied to the University of Kentucky. They applied to schools in the South, as it makes sense, right? So find what schools have good programs in your area, right? Find programs that also have a lot of funding. This is something that people don't want to talk about, is the money, all right? And I'm going to tell you something, the piece of advice that I was given that I think all of you should take. If you're going to go to grad school, don't go to grad school unless it's paid for, okay? So if you apply to a school and they don't offer you full funding or they don't offer you any funding, don't go. I truly believe that is one way God is really clear about opening and shutting doors. I don't believe you should go into debt for something that you want, something that might further your education down the line, but is not also financially prudent. Those doors will open, and it may not be right away, but it's going to be at some point. So only go if it's paid for, because it's very expensive, and you don't have time to hold a job while you're in grad school. You don't. You will kill yourself. I mean that with all the love in my heart. You will kill yourself. I've watched people try to do it. I've watched people try to do it, and it doesn't work. They don't do well, they can't focus, and they're split between two different paths of what they're supposed to do. All right, so research schools, ask professors, look at funding, and get to know those programs. So the University of Kentucky holds a series of programs every summer where they have students and teachers and people of all different ages come and experience spoken Latin for a week and classes like they do. They got to know me. I did this for several summers. They got to know me, and I did this upon Dr. Clark's recommendation. Go, see what they're like. See how the professors teach. Get to know them. These schools are much more apt to give money and funding to students that they know, students who they know their work, students who they know they're not going to be throwing money away, that they know they're going to come and that they're really passionate about their subject and they're going to learn. Grad school is very competitive, very competitive. So you have to make yourself the best you can possibly be, even if that means simply emailing a chair of a department and asking questions. Ask those questions. What kind of course offerings do you have? Are you, how many candidates do you accept a year? Ask those kinds of questions, and they will remember you. They will remember you. And that I've seen my colleagues, my program was just a master's program, and several went on to apply for PhD programs. And it means a lot if they know you and they know the professors who are behind you, right? So that's another thing. Okay, so you've done that. You've applied to grad school, you've gotten in, you've gotten funding, and now you're going. So one of the things I had the opportunity of doing at the University of Kentucky, and if you go to any large university, is you're going to teach, probably, as a teaching assistant. And there are different levels of TAs. There's a TA1 who's the primary instructor. That means you write the syllabus, you make the course, you teach the course, you give the grades, you deal with all the students' problems. You laugh. Oh, you laugh. It's funny until you're like, where's the adult in the room? And then you're like, oh, that's me, I have to do that. TA2s, who are like assistants, so maybe you give a lecture occasionally if a professor's gone, you grade papers, you answer questions, you pass out things, you help the older professors with technical support when they insist on using Macs and things that can't use Macs, and you know. And then there's TA3s and 4s who do just mostly research, or maybe they help with online classes. I had the opportunity to be primarily a TA1, so I was a primary instructor. And up until that point, I had tutored for a long time, since high school, kids from elementary through college students here at Christendom. I helped start Christendom's tutoring program, the first one. And so I had experience tutoring. I had experience tutoring in groups. I had experience tutoring one-on-one. I didn't have experience teaching 25 freshmen and sophomores in college who were, only about 3 years younger than myself. And it is an experience unlike any other, right? So, you have to deal with students who come in with hangovers, right? This is a secular university. You have to deal with students who are getting information from all other classes from professors that don't believe the same things that you believe, right? Professors, they bring up things from other classes that that aren't truth, right? But they're told that they have to believe them. You get even things from other classics professors. In classics, feminism and gender studies are the thing. Homosexuality in Rome and Greece, they're hot topics right now. They're overplayed and they're overemphasized. And that's what they want to talk about because that's trendy and that's cool, right? You have to deal with kids who are in sororities and fraternities, and they have tests that are filed away in the houses, and if they have a test with the same teacher, they just give them a copy of that test and they can just study the actual test off of it. You deal with students cheating. You deal with students who are physically abused. You deal with students who get pregnant, unplanned pregnancies. You deal with students that I had a student that was robbed at gunpoint, and he had to deal with that. You deal with students who die, right? Or who have friends that die in school shootings. These aren't Christian places. They don't have the same value. So your education here and what you learn here and your principles here, you will use everywhere. And I know a lot of you, if you're going to be teaching, you want to teach in a private school, right? I get that. I teach in a private school, right? I almost didn't. I almost went to a public school. But if you go on to grad school, you're teaching at a public university. There are things you cannot say at a public university. You should be allowed to say because other people say the opposite, but you can't say them because you're on the wrong side of what they think are truth. So you have to be on your toes all the time and use everything you learned here at Christendom in all your classes to incorporate that into what you're doing. And it's not easy, and I'm not saying I did everything perfectly because I didn't. I made mistakes. I didn't know how to handle issues. I wasn't even sure I could teach for 50 minutes. You don't know how long 50 minutes is until you have to go up there and teach for 50 minutes, and then you're like, oh gosh, it's only been 35 minutes. I'm out of stuff to do, right? So, or to teach subjects that maybe you're not super comfortable with. I had to teach a mythology and folklore class. There's not a mythology and folklore anything here, and especially not one that emphasizes Russian mythology and folklore. That's what happens. They needed to put a TA somewhere. A language professor needed a TA, and I was nice and volunteered, or stupid, to go over to the Russian professor, and it was a great experience. But you never know. But I had the tools. These ladies have already talked about having the tools to research and to know where to go and how to figure out where to find the answers, and you can do it, right? And I will say the benefit, so I'm coming away with a master's degree. I did not go the PhD route. I was burnt out personally. I went straight from undergrad to grad school. I know people that don't get burnt out and they go all the way. Great. That's up to you, right? Who knows? I may go back one day. I think I'd like to be Dr. Lawyer just because. We're still awake. I'm really glad. But one thing I will say is and this is one thing I didn't do, and I'm working on, is get a certification. Get your certification because it makes you more marketable. It opens up your job opportunities. Even if you're not going to teach in a private school, or even if you want to teach in a private school, it gives you the option. It even makes you more marketable to them. And if you have a master's degree in the state of Virginia, it's a lot easier to get a certification. What happens is you'll get a temporary licensure. And what that means is you have 5 years to complete a certain number of education credits, which you can do in the summer. Like Christine was saying, how to use your summers wisely, that's a way to use your summers. And it counts as your continuing education. So teachers have to do so many hours of continuing education, it counts towards your continuing education, and you come out with a certification. Teachers that teach in the public school that hold a master's degree are automatically going to get paid more. A lot of times in your private schools, this is also the case. Not always, but often it is. Right? So that's already a plus, because if you have Christendom loans or other things, this is a better way to pay it off. So I think there are a lot of pluses to getting a master's degree. You can go get a master's degree in education, absolutely. I don't necessarily see the benefit of going and getting a master's degree in education from a secular university. I know people that have. They will tell you they didn't do anything. My sister is an elementary special education teacher, and she will tell you most of her classes she didn't learn anything. It's common sense. Common sense. So I would recommend you get a master's degree in a specialty, whether that's history, math, I don't know, classics, philosophy, theology, whatever it is. I would recommend you get a master's degree in a specific field, not just a broad master's degree in education. That's my personal experience. Other people may have other thoughts. Other people may tell you different things. That's just what I've seen. And a lot of the things that you'll learn in education classes that are, especially at secular universities, they're not of God, all right? They're very much, like these ladies have already talked about, they're very much about, well, you guys know what Common Core is, right? No. Yeah, okay, that's kind of bits and pieces of it, right? So it doesn't necessarily for the benefit of the child. Where's my time? I'm sorry. I don't even know what time it is. Okay. The last thing I'm going to say, so I also teach ESL students. So teaching English as a second language, most of my students are not native English speakers. I also tutor a little boy who's a native Arabic speaker. He's a 3rd grader. And one of the things I will tell you is this is one of the most rewarding things ever. So even if you're not sure if you want to be a teacher full-time, I recommend you consider doing ESL. And you can do an ESL program, or you can do an ESL certification, and that's one thing that I wish I would have done in grad school. I wish I would have had more experience with and known. And one thing that I'm going to be doing probably in the future, that's one way I'm going to be using my summer, is to get an ESL certification. It's one of the most rewarding experiences, and it's super interesting. We have devotions every day in my class, and we ask some of the students from China how they think the world started, because we've been talking about creation. And it's very interesting to hear that they believe in evolution, or they believe there was this giant egg that man hatched out of, and the top part of it became the sky, and the bottom of it became the earth, and that man was created when this person who was inside the egg formed him from the dust. So it's super interesting that how similar in some ways it is to the truth, right? But how it's not, and how you get the opportunity to share with them things that they may not have heard. And that's one of the missions of the school, because we have so many international students, is to share the gospel with them. Because they may have never heard it. They may never be allowed to hear it again if they go back to China, or if they go back to South Korea, or if they go back to Vietnam. They may never have the opportunity to hear about God or to hear about Jesus ever. So you do make an impact. You do use everything. I'm sorry if I rambled all over the place. But I think that's it. So thank you.